let's talk about some third rail issues. Uh, you know, the major spending programs and the ones that happen to be growing faster than the economy for reasons that you mentioned before are Social Security and Medicare and also to another extent Medicaid. It's a little bit different. So, on the Democratic side, those are the third rails, and I would say even, on with Republicans. And I want to talk about taxes as well, because that's also seems to be something of a third rail. So if we are on this unsustainable course, it seems to me that we can't we can't reverse that if we're just going to look at the discretionary programs, the annual appropriated programs, which together last year were about $1.8 trillion, about the same size as the deficit. So you could eliminate those and
Yes.
you'd still have a deficit. So anyway, how can we touch those third rails in a way that can be meaningful without pulling the rug out from people?
Well, you're right, Bob, to highlight these points. And if one puts off limits, the biggest entitlement programs and raising revenue from many people, then the fiscal problem becomes mathematically unsolvable. And so these third rails will have to be touched. Um, and it's important that we do this in ways that don't hurt people any more than necessary. And that's a serious constraint that analysts and our policymakers should have in mind. But it is possible to make reasonable changes. So, for example, many people are now living longer than their parents did. And we have raised the age for receiving full Social Security benefits from 65 to 67 over a period of decades. We phased that in, and that's a little too bad for some people. Some people who have some disability really can't work until 67. And that's why we have a disability insurance program. But raising the retirement age somewhat, while you can protect some people while nonetheless raising the age for many others. Also, people higher in the income distribution have done much better in their income growth over the last few decades than people lower in the income distribution. I think it's reasonable to ask people in the higher end of the income distribution to accept slightly lower Social Security benefits than they would have otherwise. And so you can make careful changes that nonetheless can add up to significant budget savings. And similarly, I will say on the tax side, for Americans whose incomes have not grown very much in the last few decades, I think they are feeling legitimately strapped, and we should be careful about raising taxes on them. But there are people beyond just the billionaires who have done very well economically in the last few decades, and expecting them to pay somewhat more in tax to support our economy, our society, I think is a totally reasonable thing to expect. I'm not running for office, I should say.
Right, exactly. Well, that's true. None of us are, so we can say what we want.